Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. Today we're in for a special treat because we've got an expert in the house. So this isn't just about personal story, but we've got Sarajane Aris, who is so many things. She's so many things. She's a clinical psychologist. She's been a mentor and coach with the Aspire Foundation, which is how I got connected through networks. Was the policy director of the British Psychological Society, is an author and expert in resilience, which is the theme or the topic that we're going to discuss today. And she's also set up a national mentoring scheme for clinical psychologists across the lifespan of the British Psychological Society, which is a total mouthful. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
It certainly is, and thank you for your introduction, Petra. It's a delight to be with you.
It's so exciting to have you here because, as you know, a lot of what I do, even though I'm a therapist, is resilience through my own experience. Understanding what it was that I learned from through my own hardships and trying to connect people's stories around that. But so in my mind, resilience is our ability to bounce back from adversity. So the theme of the podcast, adversity, turning it into our advantage. So it's not something that holds us back, but it's something that can springboard us if we do the right things. So I'd love to just pick your brains today for a little while and think about the topic of resilience. And how do we build it? That's the main thing. How in the world do we develop this within ourselves? What do you think?
Well, there's a lot to say, I think, here. And I think one of the key things in building resilience is actually how you deal with setbacks. In life, we have so many challenges that we face. It's becoming a faster, paced world. We face more and more things. Do we use it, adverse situations to really build our resilience and that attitude of mind? Or do we use it to feel, oh, ain't it awful, aren't I a victim? And the point is here, we do have choices as to the way in which we respond to situations. And in my book on, Beyond Resilience, we actually have a map of this, the choices that we make. And what we do with that, what leads to mastery and resilience, and what actually leads to rigidity, what we call mediocrity and ossification. And it's always how we use an experience. Do we use it? Do we look at our beliefs and assumptions around the adverse experience? Do we make assumptions that say, ain't it awful? Or, oh, let's see what's happened here. It's pretty shitty, but actually, what can I learn from this? And there's a timing. You can't, in the face of some kind of trauma, immediately see that.
I see.
But it's how you, as a person, use that. So it's the realization you have choices. You don't have to be a victim. And how we experience meaning and purpose. What meaning do we take out of a crisis that occurs to us? How do we use it? At every life point, there are changes that we have to deal with: going to school, going to university, breakup of relationships, ending jobs, new beginnings, new endings. And they all can have crises attached to them because it's an adjustment, it's a transition.
And
we have choice what we do with that. We don't necessarily
have the tools, right?
It's about developing those choices, developing those tools along the way. We aren't born with them.
Right. Do you think are some people born with more of them than others, like an innate ability to bounce back, or what do you think about that?
This is a nature-nurture argument.
Right, which is huge.
And I'm always a little bit, because I do believe we can shape how we are.
Yeah.
And we may have a certain genetic predisposition to do something, but actually with the neuroplasticity research of the brain, we can rewire ourselves. So, Rick Hanson's work is really worth looking at because, within 60 days, if you really work at changing negative thoughts, negative beliefs that have built up over time, you can rewire the brain. But we have tricky brains. because of, the way we're wired. And actually what's important is to be compassionate about that, because actually, we can learn to work with our tricky brains.
When you say compassionate, do you mean to ourselves, to other people? How do we cultivate this compassion?
I think that it's both to ourselves and to others, but unless we develop self-compassion, a compassionate heart, care for ourselves, and we have to learn it quite often, because the cultures that we're brought up in can be very critical. We have critical voices from childhood about not being good enough, da-di-da-di-da. We live in a competitive society. That's far easier in the Western world to chastise than it is to praise. So we have to learn self-compassion. And again, our book looks at strategies to deal with and learn. And it's about learning. We aren't just stuck with who we feel we are.
Which is revolutionary in itself, right? It's revolutionary in itself, just to realize that there's always hope. There's always something we can learn and develop within ourselves to move forward.
There always is, whatever the situation. There is always an opportunity for change, but it's what we do with that, whether we can believe that and take that forward. And it's that realization and awareness. And I would say one of the key things is about developing that awareness, that self-awareness, that actually we can be more than we think we are, if we choose to take a positive path for ourselves, and that creates resilience. Actually what doesn't create resilience is where people don't have adverse experiences to cope with, and so
they don't have a practice ground.
I look at young people who've had a protected life, and then they suddenly meet death, a failure at work, and it's like, bloody hell, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. Rather than because they've breezed through life.
So then they internalize
they're not prepared. So I would say one of the things that really builds resilience is actually the adversities that we face. If we can use them for our advantage, and a resilient person will always, in the end, it may be a shock, it may take some time of confusion as you go through the transition to get to that point of, right, I'm going to use this. But inside, they have learnt the skill of saying and trusting they can use this experience. And it was really interesting, Petra. We were at a talk of a great artist in the Royal Watercolour Association. I can't remember Robert's last name. He's 100.
My goodness.
He is still painting. He's now going into filmmaking at 100. Mm-hmm. And he was interviewed by Steve Jacobson, who's the president of the RWA. And Steve said, so what do you think's your secret to your, remaining as well as you do at 100? And he said, curiosity. Mm. And I would say to you that with most older people who have well-being, who have resilience, in spite of what they've been through, it's that curiosity. What's around the corner here? Not ain't it awful? This is the end. This is terrible. Yes, you go through a process of shock. We all do in the process of transition. But it's how you come out of that. And it's the things you say to yourself, the assumptions you make, and how those are built up over time. So, it's a little bit what, like Carl Jung said, the famous Jungian analyst. A success, how wonderful. A failure, how terrible. Because you do not build resilience. You don't learn how to tackle. You don't develop skills to cope with adversity. And then when you face it, a bit like, the example I gave, it's like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me, da-di-da-di-da. So there's growth from challenge.
So it's almost like going to the gym with our physical health. If you sort of build muscles, you stress them in a way in order for them to then reform and for you to become stronger. And in a way, we need that consistently.
It's that building that resilience muscle. It's a great analogy, actually. Yeah. And if I look, it's the physical exercise model, which is, if you use it, you don't lose it. If you don't use it, if you don't use it, you lose it. And, I look at elderly people, and elderly people who exercise, who keep themselves alert, who look after their physical health and well-being, diet, etc., they have a much more full life because they're engaged, they're physically looking after themselves. And as you grow older, I really do think looking after the whole being, your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your psychological well-being, your spiritual well-being are just hugely important. That kind of those building blocks, if you like, are what sustain
around the growth mindset. So that curiosity seems to link into that. So no matter what age you're at, to be learning and developing your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit just allows you to be vibrant and be able to tackle the next. So in a way, we should be looking at challenges as like, bring it on. Here's my next thing.
It's an opportunity.
Right.
Challenges are opportunities to learn.
Doesn't feel like it when you're in it, though.
A person who learns to be resilient turns around a challenge to ain't it awful, from ain't it awful to wow, what can I learn from this situation? And again, building resilience is always that, what can I learn from this? You may not get to that initially because, shocks in life can confuse us initially. But as you come out of that stage of shock or denial or whatever it is, into a realization and knowing it will change, all things change, nothing stays the same. And I do think, again, a resilient person will say, okay, so it's like this now. What can I do to change this for the future? And they always emphasize the positive. There is a sense of, oh, crap, there's loads going on here, but okay, so how can I use this? Rather than
even if you don't,
yes, you may have overwhelmed.
Sorry, so even if you don't have the answer, just having that attitude is enough to help move you forward. So
I think having that attitude, actually we never have the answer.
Right.
And I actually think that doesn't help, because I think sometimes people will say, I've got to have the answer. There isn't an answer. Remaining curious. Oh gosh, what are the options here? Rather, my God, I've got to have an answer to this. And it's that ability to play with whatever is there, to sit with it. If you're faced with crisis, it's very easy to go into panic. And actually, a resilient person will stand back, will say, Christ, this is fucking awful, excuse my language, this is terrible. Yeah. I'm faced with this, and this. What can I do about it? Let me pause. I'll give you an example. My husband had a stroke on the day after New Year, 2 and a bit years ago. And, it was a real shock. I came in from the gym. I won't go into this too. And he was there unable to talk. And it could have been a potentially awful situation. He just got into, Christ, we've got to get the ambulance. We got him in time. He had 20 minutes. He had a bleed. And he has used that experience. He had no language. He didn't know who he was. But because of his curiosity about life and determination to do the best he could, he has developed those neural networks again. He's a fully functioning individual. But what he's done is reflected on it. He used a journal to help him in that experience. And as a neuropsych friend of mine who I phoned, colleague, said, actually, those neurons that fire together wire together, as Rick Hanson's saying, and actually they strengthened further. Because if something's cut and it explodes, as it kind of finds its pathways back, the circuits, they actually strengthen. And so I'm using that as an analogy for resilience, because we can feel broken, but actually we can strengthen through whatever losses, whatever shocks we go through. And that in itself can build resilience. So it's our attitude, our way of looking at things that can really, really help. I think something we often forget in this fast-paced world we live in is to learn to listen and trust our own inner wisdom. Yes. That still small voice. And I would say resilient people actually will take that time to listen to that still small voice and have an innate, learned to trust their inner wisdom. And we all have an inner knowing. It's just we get disconnected from that. And I would say whatever strategies you can to reconnect with your own inner wisdom.
What do you do to connect to your inner wisdom? Do you have practices or habits that help you or that you've learned along the way?
Lots of things, but it's normally time out. I get up early in the morning, just connect with nature, breathe, actually become present to the moment.
To create space within the noisy world.
And just will ask myself a question about something that I might be wondering about, I'm trying to solve a problem. I'll just pop it into my consciousness and see where that goes to, and see what images, words, phrases arise. And we'll make a notebook. I really do think journaling in developing your own wisdom and resilience can help enormously, because you can track back to see, wow, there was that and that and that. So I would say cultivating, acknowledging that we all have an inner knowing, an inner wisdom, and working with that, developing that still small voice when you're at a choice point, and realising there isn't one path. So you take a choice to take this path. It may not be the best one, but it's a learning, and you'll reach another choice point. And it's about, so I've got another choice to make here. Do I, go to America? Do I stay in England? What do I do here? And it's not that something's right or wrong, and it's that attitude, because you will learn something. It may be pretty uncomfortable, going to another culture and all the rest of it, but you're not stuck. And I think it's that attitude with a resilient person, and cultivating resilience is actually, when your back's against the wall, when you feel stuck, you're never stuck. You've always got choices. So there's something about, in terms of building resilience, it's emphasizing the positive, not denying that there are, pretty shitty things, really difficult experiences, but say, what can grow out of this? I mean, if you look at a wonderful analogy from nature, where do lilies grow?
I have no idea. I'm a city girl. In the water, in the pond.
No,
right?
no. Lilies grow in muck and dirt.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So really, the analogy is, out of something that appears yucky,
yes,
the most beautiful lilies are so beautiful.
Yes, white and serene.
So it's kind of like, if we take an attitude that, whatever shit we're in, there's always a nugget of gold. And it's these I think what I'm talking about are attitudes and how we create meaning from the situation that we're in.
Say more about that, because I'm curious about the meaning.
Well, so, Brian used his stroke. He created meaning out of that for himself as an opportunity to grow, as realizing, he's a typical type A individual who drives himself. So he was looking at, in that, it wasn't just a stroke. It was a stroke of luck. He created something out of that from which he could grow and build. Another person might see a stroke as something terrible, their health is going to be affected, their life will never be the same again.
It's over.
It's over. So that person is creating meaning in terms of a story that's about lack. He was using his experience to help him along his own journey.
So you're saying,
and it is a journey,
but it's the type of meaning that we're trying to create. So we're trying to create meaning that helps us frame it in a useful way.
That's a great summary, Petra. Yeah, and again, our book, we've got a chapter on meaning making, and Victor. There's a great example of Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you know him, who was in a Nazi concentration camp.
Man's Search for Meaning.
Jewish. And he created meaning for himself. He wrote the book about meaning making. From the most adverse situation, he created meaning by writing the book, by reflecting. And
not only that,
to build...
Not only that, the meaning making helped him survive, like literally live.
That's exactly why meaning making is so important. And that if we just see an experience as good or bad, and if we, don't really, to build resilience, you need to be able to see the experiences, whatever the experience is, in your life to teach you about your path and purpose. And there are no givens. It's an uncertain journey. And that's the excitement. But a resilient person will create that meaning of excitement, whereas somebody who hasn't built their resilience may start from the viewpoint, I've got to control it, I can't, and then become more and more anxious. It's letting go into something that enables something else to happen. And too often people hold on tight. Somebody who's building resilience is open and accepting, and as I say, it's about curiosity. I think it's about an attitude of mind, cultivating an attitude of mind and assumptions that are about growth, that there aren't limits if you choose to take that approach. That actually you can do anything in your life if you choose to. It's only your own perception that keeps those barriers and limits there. So it's the way we view things that often leads us to either become resilient or not. And it's learning that art. Again, we're not born with it. We have to develop and cultivate those skills of seeing things in a more positive way, but catching when we're negative. And that requires developing that self-awareness muscle. Standing back, watching, reflecting, taking a moment out. You don't have to take an hour out. Actually, you can sit on the loo and take a couple of minutes breathing, if you're in a busy life, and just allowing yourself to drop into a place of conscious knowing. But you've got to consciously do that. You've got to be aware enough to say, okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to develop this resilience muscle in this kind of a way. So it's about being proactive. If you're a passive person that just lets things happen, that's not going to help build resilience for you. and isn't going to transform whatever's going on for you. So there are some personal things that I think are important in terms of resilience. I think collaborating, networking, developing good relationships that support you are really, really important. And reaching out. Some people don't reach out. Learning from other people. Resilient stories. Yeah.
So finding places where you can be truthful and connect and even be vulnerable in order to learn and develop.
You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be open. You've got to make mistakes. You've got to be able to say, God, I really fucked up here. Yes, it's terrible. But, there's a lovely saying, it's disastrous but not serious. And actually, we take ourselves far too seriously in the West, and actually, if I look back on my life, I wish I'd not taken things quite so seriously at certain points, when I was much younger, but that's something I've learned. So,
what would have been different? What would have been different for you if you didn't take things so seriously?
I think I'd have had more fun when I was head of psychology. I was
it's quite
so
a serious
concerned.
Job.
Pardon?
Quite a serious job, it sounds like.
Yeah, very. And the health service is a really challenging place. And, you want the best for people who you're managing. And I could sometimes, because I got far too overworked, and didn't take enough time at certain periods, I took it too seriously. And actually, it's a great indicator if you're getting too serious about something. Maintaining your self-esteem is really important. And when you're stressed or non-resilient, it's very easy to believe you're not good enough, da-di-da-di-da. And it's realising we're always good enough. We always are, whatever it is. And it's creating that self-talk, that belief, knowing, you're a unique person who has their own gifts. And it's finding what forum that is for you the way to express in this life, your particular gifts and contribution to, your community of people. I think that it's always creating opportunities for yourself, and having compassion, as I said earlier on, and creating compassion. Paul Gilbert has done a lot of work on the research of how actually learning to be compassionate, creating a compassionate self, can really, really begin to enable that sense of resilience to maintain and sustain. And there are all sorts of, beyond this, initial interview, all sorts of strategies that can be used. You can write yourself a compassionate letter from a compassionate other, have images of compassionate people and begin to embody those qualities, acting as if da-di-da-di-da. And, it's about cultivating a mindful presence, I would say to you. Building resilience, because we're in a do-do world. Being able to just stand back, breathe, and learn to be mindful about your body, your being, your breathing, what you're thinking, your inner sense of yourself, mindful of others and your relationship with others, slowing down to be present to the moment, that mindful presence, can really bring you into another dimension of consciousness that moves you beyond resilience to something greater than. And again, the book, Beyond Resilience, looks at some of those strategies. I mean, it's all in the book.
It's all in the book. Good. And listen, we'll put the book title and where to get it, sort of a link to it within the notes, because if people want to really find the detail around the strategies, then that's the place to go. I want to summarize what I heard. I might have missed something, but the compassionate thing really struck me because, like you said, we can have such a critical voice in our head. So learning to be compassionate to ourselves, taking a bit of a lighter approach sometimes to life. Curiosity seems to be just the catch-all word, that 100-year-old man saying, if he can just continue to be curious, his well-being will improve. And also our attitude. So any adversity that, I'm up leveling in business at the moment and it's fucking scary and I'm on my own and it feels lonely sometimes. But because I've been through so many things in my past, I'm a bit like, bring it on, give me your worst, because I know that I've been, I could be dead, I could be homeless, I could be so many things, an addict on the street, right? So I'm like, lose a deal, feel rejected, who cares? So I can definitely see that historical evidence base allows me to look at this with more resilience and not let it knock me. And then as a parent, I think what I've been learning through all the podcasts and through your expertise is it's okay to witness our children dealing with challenges. It's okay to allow our partners and our loved ones to deal with adversity and challenge. We don't have to fix them or protect them all the time. It's actually counterintuitive, right?
It is, and actually, if you fix it for them, they're not going to learn. If I look at people whose families have protected them from life's lessons, actually they're more frightened, they're more risk averse, they haven't learned. We only learn really from mistakes. Oh yeah, it's great to learn, it's great to have successes, but actually what do you learn? Yes, it helps your self-esteem, it helps your sense of who you are, but actually it's through the things that don't go right that teach you perseverance, that teach you that, when you're knocked down, you can get up again. And the more you do that, the more your resilience actually strengthens and the more it becomes an unconscious competence. But you have to go through those experiences. There's no bypassing.
And I love what you said about being proactive. Like there are things that you can do, even in peacetime, so to speak, to learn and develop, what are the techniques and strategies that I can put in place so that when the tough times hit, you're skilled up and you can be present to it, face up to it. Because a lot of us try and avoid these things through numbing out on whatever, addictive things, Netflix, sex, like the whole sort of list of them, to try and avoid really feeling what's going on for us. So your thing about presence and mindfulness, and I wonder how gratitude practices play a part in this. Do you think that a lot of people talk about saying 3 things that you're grateful for can be a nice routine that helps reframe how you look at things? Do you know anything around that?
Yes, it is a technique. It's again how somebody uses it, and I would prefer appreciation. What are 3 things I appreciate rather than be grateful for? Because gratefulness has an assumption about I should be grateful or something. But I think appreciation it doesn't carry that judgment.
I love that.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
What are 3 things I appreciate about myself, about someone else who's close to me today, in this moment?
Which helps
and I think that can bring you, it can remind you of actually what is there for yourself.
Amazing.
If that makes sense.
It does. It makes so much sense. Sarajane, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you? And we'll obviously have to have you on again.
Well, thank you for that. I hope it's really helpful for your listeners. I'm on Sarajane Aris at gmail.com, but it'll need to be at the end. There's no H in my name. And obviously I'm on Skype and social media with Sarajane Aris. So I think those are the best forums.
Yeah, and I know you're on LinkedIn and you've got your book references on there, and we'll add that into the show notes. Sarajane, I'm sure we're going to have you on again. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I needed to hear that today, so thank you so much.
It's a real pleasure, and thank you for your interest, Petra, and for the work that you're doing, because I'm sure it will reach out and touch many, many people. So good luck on your journey too, and I look forward to talking with you as and when. Get well.
Thank you.